hi everyone. I'm Anjali, and I'm the co-host for today's 15th ACM SIGCHI Mumbai Chapter meeting. Typically, in our meetings, we have two talks and we have one book review. Also, in November meeting, we had a panel discussion on ethical design. In today's meeting, we have two presentations by Priyank Sharma and Vaidya. And we have one book review by Divya Padmanabhan. Is that how you pronounce it? I hope.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so our first presenter for today is Priyank Sharma. The title of his presentation is Deconstructing National Education Policy 2020 for School Education. So Priyank is an engineer. He with a Bachelor of Technology from NIT Jalandhar. He's a social worker with a master's from TIS Guwahati. He's a counselor with a diploma from NCERT and a researcher and an educationist with an MPhil from NEPA. That's a lot of academic accomplishments. Priyank has an interest in exploring the side effects of education and is currently enrolled as a doctoral scholar at NEPA. He's a travel enthusiast and has traveled extensively to various alternative schools across the country. So Priyank, you have 30 minutes for the presentation, followed by 5 minutes for Q&A. And if any of you have any questions, please wait until the end of the presentation, or you can also drop your queries in the chat. We'll be keeping a track of it. So over to you, Priyank. All the best.
Thank you, Anjali. I'll just share my screen. Is it visible? Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, hello everyone. I think thank you, Anjali, for the introduction. I don't know how much I fit in the bill, but you know, to talk about national education policy, which took around, let's say, 5 years to come to fruition, and to talk about it in 30 minutes, again, it's kind of a little difficult task, and I don't know if I'll be able to do justice most part of it. I just want to say that education is something that we all can relate to. So it is not a rocket science which people don't understand. There is some say of each one of us in education. So I wanted to keep the talk very short, try and take more questions if possible. And so I'll just try to cover a basic aspects. So whatever topic I cover, each of it, actually could be hours of discussion. But it's just a cursory, not an exhaustive take, just a cursory take on every topic. So I'll begin by saying, who am I? So when I say, again, when I say who am I, it's not, what degrees I have or what experience I have. In fact, I like the fact that there's no designation of mine in the conference's poster. I just want to say what political position I take, because that is important. Am I someone who's going to critique the policy, or am I someone who's going to rationalize the policy, an expert, a policy know-how guy? So the truth is I'm none. So, there is both pros and cons of it. Cons being that, I may not have the actual in-depth policy because I was not part of the policy formulation. So I may not know every aspect of it. But again, when I say the good part of it, I am trying to give a very balanced, holistic view of what certain aspects of policy talk about. So it will be more of a balanced view. So, in fact, that is what I was asked to do. I was asked to talk about the policy. If I was asked to critique or explain the know-how, then it would have been a very different presentation as such. Little backdrop. So what is an education policy? Recently, I was listening to my VC, Professor N.V. Verghese. He gave a very interesting definition, if I were to quote him, that education is actually an intellectual anticipation of the future direction of education. So the policy is actually nothing but an intellectual anticipation. It's a statement of intent. Now, it's not legal documents. It's just an intent that how our future education should look like. Now, where did this policy come from? So India follows kind of a bottom top-down approach. How does it work? So it started in 2016 when there was a TSR committee which came in. Then again, draft came in 2019, and then 2020 we finally have the policies. In all the middle, you have suggestions and and notes taken from across the country, from all governance, particular like BUS, DUS offices, as well as stakeholders when it comes to teachers, students, parents, general public, everyone. So you take data, you take advices, you take suggestions from the public, then the top management, when I say the people, the bureaucrats, the experts, certain BCs, certain people who have done considerable work in the field of education, they frame up the policy and we have it. Then it is again from the top, it goes to the bottom, that that everyone understand what is the future of education like, what we should do about it and everything. What are previous policies? So we have had two previous policies, one in 1968, National Policy in Education, and another one in 1986-92. I just wanted to say that earlier we had, the focus was more on access, and the current policy, the 2020 policy, is trying to make a shift, that we are talking more about quality now. From access, we are trying to move to quality. Now, is policy a legal document binding for states to follow? So the answer is no. See, education is in concurrent list. So constitution has three lists: union list, state list, and concurrent list. So education is in concurrent list, and it has stake by both, like both state and the center has a say in it. So it is not a binding that, that if the national policy in education has come in, every state has to follow it in toto. It's not like that. So the state has its own stake, that what part of national policy they can bend it, they can utilize it the way they want to anyway. So I wanted to leave all of you with this question for now, that then why should we have an education policy at all? Now, when you have a national education policy and the states have the right to say that we don't want to adopt it, we don't want to go for it, then why are we having an education policy? And is there a way out that center can make sure that the education policy percolates to the bottom, even if the state has a say, has the right to reject it in one way or the other? So that is something I want to leave the audience to think for now, and I can come back to it in the Q&A session if required. Coming to ECC, early childhood education care. So I will touch four aspects, all the four aspects, very briefly, and I've divided into two parts. What is the idea? What is the backdrop? Why has this come up? And the conflict which each aspect tells us. So, till now, we, or let's say the government, assumed responsibility of the learning of every child from the age of 6. So we have RT, right to education, which tells that free and compulsory education has to be provided to every child from age 6 to 14. But what about the child before the age 6? So that is where ECC comes in. It's a very important policy aspect that, 85% of a child's brain develops prior to age 6. In such a scenario, if you leave the child on his or her own, and it is only at age 6 that he or she is, allowed to come in the system, or is assumed responsibility of, and then expected to perform at the level of other peers who might have had access to enough resources or preschools and everything. I think it was not a fair this thing. So it kinds of serves as a social leveler, and the government is trying to assume responsibility of learning before age 6 as well. So the idea is to have a play, activity, discovery based learning. Now there's a lot of literature which can give you the benefit of the program. So if you see the learning outcomes of countries like Philippines, and like many countries adopt this, because when you have early childhood education care, the students start off early and they are able to cope up with whatever challenges they have to face in grade 1 and beyond. So the learning process starts early, and it kinds of takes off from there. So the outcomes in overall increases in that person. Now, what is the conflict in this? No, how much of a play-based learning you make it, it is still going to be structure. And the bigger question is, do you want to put a child this early into a program? It can actually be counterproductive if it is not implemented properly. I have an example of a friend. So my friend's son was, he developed habit of reading very early in his life, and his mother, and he used to go to library every day before he went to school. So he enjoyed books. He liked to read. He liked to talk to his mother about those books and everything. After he was put in a Montessori school, again, so-called Montessori play-based learning school, and he was coerced to pick some books and read a particular books, finish those learning benchmarks and everything, he started disliking the whole reading process, and he no longer wanted to visit library. He no longer wanted to uh, read books and all that, because he was already coerced to get involved in that learning in the structure setup of a school. So the problem is that if you are not able to employ a free learning atmosphere for the child, it may not give out results which it intends to do. And we have examples for that. So there was a study by UNICEF in 3 states. So ECC is not something which is new. There are states which have taken responsibility of ECC, but I'm just quoting a study from UNICEF where they found that even after ECC there was really low outcomes, and it owed to formal instruction which was being used. So there was no free environment which was there in those states, in schools of those states. So that is why I'm saying that the conflict stays in that manner, that when you employ something like ECC, it has to really come out the way it is intended to. Otherwise, it becomes difficult. Curriculum design. Okay. So there are certain sweeping changes which are going to happen. Now, earlier we had a 10 plus 2 plus 3 system. Like the school education is 10 plus 2. Now we'll have a 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. 3 years of preschool plus 2 years, which comes at the foundational learning. Then 3 years of preparatory, which is like third, fifth. Then 3 years of middle school, sixth, seventh, eighth, and 4 years of high school. Next, we will have flexibility and wide range of choosing subjects. Again, a very good idea, because till now we had compartments of science, arts, commerce, and we had to choose certain subjects from a certain stream only. We could not, like somebody who wants to study physics and psychology could not do it together. So the idea is to deconstruct. The idea is to break these stringent compartments and let more choice for students to prevail. Third, curriculum content will be reduced in each subject to its core essential. I think this is also important, because a lot of things, a lot of topics in our current textbooks are obsolete in some manner, and we no longer require in this age of technology those topics. So I think it is important for us to look back and see that what are those topics. Do we really need such huge content in our textbooks? Fourth one, Indian Sign Language to be standardized. Positive this thing that we have when we talk about inclusive education, it is important that we have a certain sign language which is there across the country. But I'll start with this. I was saying that Indian Sign Language is to be standardized, but when we talk about inclusive education, we need to speak about how it needs to be universalized. We're talking about giving certain languages options to students. Why not sign language? We're talking about inclusive space, that every child without worrying about his or her disability could sit together and learn, but we're still not able to talk about universalization of sign language. Another conflict was when we are saying that curriculum content needs to be reduced, but what about the entrance exams? If you see, in my times, I remember, if you read organic chemistry of NCERT, you could never even attempt all the questions in the JEE exam, let alone finding answers for them. So on one hand, we are saying that we'll reduce the curriculum. On another hand, we are making the entrance more and more tough, and the content is in a way widening if you want to prepare for those exams. Next, when we are saying that there has to be a wide range of subjects, it is not that CBSE is not offering subjects currently. If you see, there are a lot of subjects which CBSE per se offers students, but there's no teacher for that. For example, a student can take French as a subject in CBSE, but there are no teachers who are going to teach that student. So when we are saying that there will be a wide range of subjects, we need to figure out that where do you get teachers for that? It's just not possible currently, when it is not possible to provide teachers for every subject which is as such offered by CBSE. How do you look at providing the flexibility and a wide range of subjects? Because not offering is not enough. Last, when we see about the design, we currently are kind of moving from the UK based structure to a US based structure. So US has a 4 years of high school and everything. But the bigger question is, when we are making such sweeping statements of revamping the whole design, are we ready for it? So I want to take RT example. So when RT came in, there are many states which had elementary education for 7 years, not 8 years. And RT made provision of making 8 years of elementary education free and compulsory. So the center had to do a lot of convincing of states for the states to agree that they have to shift to a 8 year of elementary education. So just one shifting from 7 to 8 required a lot of effort. Now we are talking about a sweeping change in design. I think it requires a lot more rigor than we can visualize. And for us to be prepared for it, a certain policy which can come and tell is not enough. How do we go about it? So it's a big question in that respect. Because only vision is not enough. If you talk about no detention policy, it had a very good vision that you'll remove that label of failure from the students. Nobody will fail, and the focus will not be on exam. The focus will not be on learning. So on paper it looked really great, but somehow the Cave Committee report which came in had told that India was not ready for such a policy. Though it is very good, but we are not ready. So the same question applies: are we really ready in that perspective? Medium of instruction. I think this is one of the hot topics in media circles. See, I think there's ample literature which can tell you that learning takes place best in mother tongue. And for younger kids, it is very important that they are taught in mother tongue. They are able to relate with the pedagogy, and they are rooted in their own context. When we say acculturation as a goal of education, it is something which is very important, and teaching in mother tongue really helps. It eludes the identity conflict which the child can undergo at such a young age. So this guy Khan sir from Patna, his YouTube videos are very kind of viral nowadays. And there's one IFS officer who commented that if I was taught in that manner, I would have cleared UPC very easily. So why do people find it very engaging? Because he speaks in a colloquial language, which students can relate to. So learning takes place best when it happens in mother tongue, and it is very important. So if you talk about why dropouts happen in some of the report parts of the country, tribal areas, because people are taught in their regional language, not in mother tongue. And it is very difficult for children to engage with that kind of pedagogy. Now, having said that, what is the conflict? How do you make it happen? So with such a diversity in place, so many people speaking different languages in one area, there are dialects which do not even have scripts. So how do you make it happen that mother tongue will be used for pedagogy for all the children, because children have different mother tongues? So it is kind of difficult when it comes to the practical reality. Also, English is a medium of aspiration. So somehow parents have this aspiration that my kid should go to a English medium school. So now policy can be a public good only when it matches with public demand. So there has to be considerable effort which has to go from the government side for it to come to the grassroots level and help parents understand the efficacy of using mother tongue as a medium of instruction. This is very important. Testing and assessment. Okay, so there are certain ideas. One, rote memorization. From a rote memorization based assessment, we'll move to a competency based assessment. State school examinations in 3, 5, and 8. Board exams are supposed to be made a lot easier, to be conducted twice. And there is a need to eliminate the need for coaching for cracking the entrance exams of universities. That is what the paper says. What is the conflict? Okay, you can make boards easier, but what about the college admission cutoffs? We already have 99%, and I don't know if we'll have 100 and what after that, 105, I don't know what happens. But again, when the cutoffs are rising, making the boards easier doesn't solve the purpose. It just doesn't. Now, also when we see why there is an entrance exam, what is exam per se, what does it talk about? So, entrance exams are not a process of selection. They are in fact a process of rejection. So what happens if there are 10 lakh students who want to, let's say, who take the exam JEE for entering into an engineering government institute. Now those 10 lakh students, let's say even 5 lakh have the ability or not. Okay, let's not go in numbers. But what the government does is that they keep the onus on the students that, we have 10,000 seats. You were not able to crack the exam, so we were not given a seat. It is not our responsibility. So it is kind of legitimizing their failure, putting the onus on students. But the truth is somebody has to fail, because there are only 10,000 seats. Even if out of 10 lakh, 5 lakh have the ability to become really good engineers, the government doesn't have space for them. So, and the government cannot say that we do not have resources, we cannot give you a place to study engineering or whatever. So this whole entrance exam is a way to put the onus on the student and legitimize their failure, tell them that you are responsible, not us. Next, there's a problem with standardization. I'll tell you a story which I heard from my deputy director when I was in NCRT. She had to prepare a board paper. So she made the paper and she sent it to the concerned authorities. Now what she was asked is, ma'am, question paper is good, okay, fine, and you have also given us an answer, sort of a key, but we want to understand from which part of the textbook these answers are taken, from which line to which line we have to search, or the students should have read what information has to be included, so that there is a common answer key across the country. No, there's an assumption, underlying assumption in this is that student can never give a better answer to a certain question posed by the teacher in the board exam. And however creative, innovative you be in your answer, you will still be marked on that answer key because it has to be common throughout. There was an interesting case in which there was a girl who got around 70 plus in her favorite subject, political science. She had put a case on CBSE in the court. All of the subjects she got 90 plus, and the subject she was very sure of, she got only 72 or something. Now she had some powers like influential links. That is why she was hurt. Otherwise, it is again not possible. Now the court summoned, and there were 3 copies. One of the child, what the child has written, what the girl had written in her answer sheet. One of what the answer key said, and one what the textbooks read. And it was given to a lot of experts. One of them was Professor Kishan Kumar, who had told me this story. That when the copy arrived to him, he found out that the answer of the girl given by her in the board exam were much better than the answer key. But somehow CBSE had one framework of marking the answers, and it did not fit in there, and so she was marked like that. So she had put in the evaluation, and she again from 72 there were only 2 marks which are increased. But that is how the standard assessment works. When you try to standardize it across the country, it is difficult for us to for teachers to have an agency. Like, if you see, teachers are not in a way responsible for marking, because there's already an answer key which is in place. So where is the agency of teachers? And it is important because you want to display a nationwide board exam result and everything. But again, it is more important for the teachers to have an agency, have a say in it. I think I'll just wind up here. I just wanted to put one thing, that how can you, as a person, whoever is right now watching this or may watch it later, change or make a dent in the system? Because all said and done, when we say that policies are so necessary, there's so much of debate happening in public space that these policies will revamp education system and there will be a lot of change and everything. I think it really doesn't work in exactly that way. Because if you say some sweeping policies like RTA, RD and everything has not come up from education policy per se only, it has come from the public. So when I as a person has to make some dent in the system, there are 2 ways of doing it. One is you become involved in the system directly and indirectly, like you go and change the system being inside it, or influence it from being an expert or anything. Or you create a parallel system which tries to threatens or influence the primary system, and there the eventual change comes. So I feel that all of us also have to assume responsibility, not just that the government is doing something and there are answers, every answer in that national education policy itself. When all of us assume responsibility and choose the 2 out of the 2 ways to do it, choose something wisely, then and do great in it, I think we would see a much better change. I think. Thank you. I don't know if I've shooted the time.
No, we are good on time actually.
Cool.
That was a very informative presentation, Priyank. Thank you so much for that. We'll take the questions in for the next 5 minutes. And if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Use the raise your hand feature. So Ronak, I think Ronak has a question. So
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you for the nice presentation. It was really informative. My question was that before the NEP was even implemented, there were talks of the CBSE formalizing design thinking and computer education from standard 6. So, do you think there are more opportunities opening up for creative learning in schools right now due to this NEP? Thank you.
I think that is something very certainly it is very promising in that per se, because when you talk about design learning or creativity, I think it is in bold mention in many parts of the policy that it is something which has to be incorporated. But what happens on the ground is something which you have to wait and watch, because everything said and done written in the policy, we have to see how it actually materializes on the ground. And though I'm very hopeful that it is something which has a huge scope, and I think there's a lot to be offered by the policy on the ground, but we'll have to wait and see how much of it materializes.
I have a second part to that question, if I may.
Yeah.
So, do you think the NEP enables new startups to work in this space? And if yes, then what is the scope of working towards that goal of promoting creative learning in schools?
When you say new startups, what do you mean starting schools or learning spaces? I can give you an example. For example, okay, if you could answer that.
I'm talking about present as well as new upcoming startups. If there's a space for that.
See, I'll tell you, there are a lot of alternative spaces which are already run in the country, which kind of deviate from the conventional form of education. You can call them startups, you can call them learning spaces, you can call them schools, because after RT we are not supposed to call them school, but still. So the impact RT had on them was not really great. And NEP again doesn't speak much about the alternative forms. It is not really catering to those design thinkings which are unconventional in that per se. So in fact, after RT, there are a lot of there was a hue and cry that everybody has to go to school, because it is compulsory for every parent to send their child to the school. So a lot of alternative schools had to be shut down because they could not run any longer, unless and until the parents have a say, and parents can say that they are homeschooling their kids, which is still a kind of a legal thing to do. But otherwise, a lot of spaces had to be shut down. And again, when I say NEP doesn't really frantically or outspokenly speak about these alternate spaces.
Great.
all right,
Thank you.
we have another question from Rupan.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So Priyank, great presentation. Gives a good gist of things, and just building on top of what I could understand about standardizing and having one umbrella for the nation, and at least reaching close to that. One of the concern which I have is how do we build up an infrastructure for a plan like that, and how do we make sure that there is no like with this kind of cross policy implementation, availability of infrastructures like not just school but something like a digital device, etc., doesn't become a privilege to some and non-availability to others.
Now, when you say how do we, that is something.
Yeah.
Again, how do we? I don't know. But again, how it has to be done is something which is interesting, because when you say infrastructure, we already are emphasizing a lot on infrastructure. But when it has to reach to every nook and corner of the country, and it has to come down to so that there is no, as you said, no partiality in that per se. There's no head start for some people who have access to, let's say, technology, or who do not have access to technology. Whenever you make a one way of saying things is, whenever you make such a sweeping change per se, there is bound to be inequality. You can't help it. You really can't think that we'll start equally. It doesn't happen that way. but how early can you close those gaps? How early is something we'll have to see. That if you start some infrastructure aspect, let's say technology, because technology is right now in the time of COVID-19 is the medium to make learning happen in many parts of the country. There are still parts which do not have access to it. So there is already a divide which is growing. The inequality is increasing. So having said that, we cannot say that we don't teach anyone. So it's kind of a conflicting thing, but I think the right people have to make sure that how early can you bridge those gaps. You make note of these gaps. You cannot just let them keep propagating like that. We have to make sure that we keep a track of those inequality being increasing, and make sure that as early as possible we make the right interventions.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I know not again not totally answering what you just asked, but that is what.
That's fine. I understand.
All right. So we'll take one last question from Deepak, and then we'll move on to our next presenter.
Hi Priyank, very nice
Hi.
presentation and good discussion as well. So actually I was reading the National Education Policy, and something I found that kept on bothering me. So I'll just read it out what is written in the policy. It says, indeed, with the quickly changing environment, landscape, and global ecosystem, it is becoming increasingly critical that children not only learn, but more importantly, learn how to learn. So this is what is mentioned in the policy. But when it says about learn how to learn, probably I was thinking about a pedagogy which is more engaging or enjoyable, integrated, or holistic, something like that. But I didn't find enough details which reflects on pedagogy. So could you please tell, according to your experience, is there anything mentioned about learning how to learn and how the policy enables it?
See, I think Ronak and someone else also who just came before this, and you all three, I think we should wait for the plan of action if it comes. Like, why I'm saying this is that after 1986 policy came in, there was a plan of action which came after 6 years, right? So when you say that how do you make the digital divide not happen, or what Ronak asked, or when you are asking that uh, that how what kind of pedagogy we'll have in learning how to learn, there can be a lot of things which needs to happen, but what exactly will happen is something which we'll have to. I'm another person to comment on, and I think when we say about these policies, there certainly should. I'm hoping that there has to be a roadmap for each of those questions which you just asked, and that roadmap supposedly should come out in the near future. That when the policy is saying certain thing, okay, this has to happen. How does it happen? How does it happen on the ground? Like 1986, we had it in 1992, the plan of action. We can just hope that there's another plan of action which is in line, which clears these doubts that how on ground this will be visualized.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
All right. Great then.